how much mental health education did you guys have to this day, back in the day until now? How much understanding did you have over just mental health? And that's to anyone, whoever wants to start the conversation.
I mean, as far as being taught like from school to us,
From school, from just anything that gave
oh,
you the knowledge about it.
I mean, so much of it was self-taught. I mean, a lot of it was just, me more or less obsessing over, what the hell's going on. I just wanted to like know what was bothering me or what was bothering other people and kind of get a grasp on, how to deal with it. Trying to, for one, just realize, well, I knew art, but just really realize that like, yo, like I'm not crazy. Like the things I'm thinking are not, so out of pocket that they're just beyond reality. It's just more of a reason to find out, okay, let me ground this in something. Like one of the things I do too is I'll look up, there's a whole list of biases that you can look up. And if you look up the biases online, there might even be like a chart that has them. You can, if anything, I highly suggest like just reading through them and read where have these biases popped up on your end in your life. Things like confirmation bias, where you're trying to look for things that confirm what you already think, or things like like a angel bias, where you listen and feel more comfortable with people you're attracted to, like just things like that, like where you look at the biases and you look back at your life to say, okay, where have I been leading myself astray, and where have I been led astray by someone else, these type of things. um that's just an example of like so many different like medium resource, like medium articles that I've read, different just uh, even Instagram accounts, just different things that you could Google, books that I've read, like even for me, like trying to build up my profile as a public speaker, like trying to focus more so on differentiating myself in the market by focusing on habits, by focusing on the wellness that comes with thought patterns and how that feeds into our daily activity. Like so much of this is loops. We've talked about PTSD as a continuous cycle. Like if you're able to find the source of the habit, and you can like nix that and then start a new habit, and it feels awkward for 30, 60, 90 days, but then it feels natural, you've already set yourself on that 1% daily improvement towards a whole new stratosphere of opportunities. So like being able to do that, it still is, it's taking a lot of just research, reflection, and trying to make a lot of the content my own, so that when I go to help people, I'm giving them what I know I've tried and tested and have formatted to where I can maybe make a living off of this.
I understand. I understand. Yeah, and you can definitely do it, man. I believe in you. And a book that I would even suggest would probably be one of the best books if you're going to do public speaking is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale
Yep,
Carnegie. One of my favorite books. It really
classic.
taught me a lot when it comes down to just talking to people. Um, but yeah, so anyone else? Because for me, when it comes down to mental health education, I think we have physical education in schools. Why can't we have mental health education the same way? We talk about all this other stuff in there. Why can't we have that in there? Um,
It's too close to the truth. I mean, now real talk, because I mean, just to kind of speak on it briefly, like there are so
hmm
many things that get taught that are more so taught to keep us in line. They're more
Yes.
so things that, and if anything, people don't really realize when it comes to even education, there's so much of it that's a racket of just dissenting opinions amongst the people who decide what we learn. Like there's so many
hmm
people who literally sit in a room and decide what we learn and what is considered common knowledge amongst us, even state by state. So you have to remember that there's a group of people, a group of older people disconnected from from your generation and even your experience, especially as a person of color, particularly if you're a Black person, of what it is you're supposed to learn and know. Like when I was a junior in high school, we had one of my classmates brought a friend from Atlanta to come and listen to our history class, and it just so happened we were talking about the Civil War, and we talked specifically about how the South was fighting to protect their right to maintain slavery as a source of their economy. And we asked that Atlanta person had they ever heard that specifically, because the book specifically said that. They said no. They said it was specific about pride and all this and that, all the stuff you be hearing that it's just
It is not. Yeah.
but but it's like there's so much that gets decided upon that. So it's like so much of this ends up having to be what you seek out for yourself, because the powers that be, whether it's mental health education, sex education, financial education, these are things that you would have to go to the top, within your state, or even, go federal, to be able to push for a good 10, 15, 20 years to get at least a little bit of momentum and progress in. But it's worth it.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'll add to that. It's easy to control what you can contain, right? So once you start to opening up people's minds to learning about themselves, right, the power that resides in them, right, to head towards healing, and to really get a knack on everything that I'm capable of doing, right? When you talk about mental health and awareness and education, it's a fear, right? It's a fear that if we empower people of color, right, with the tools and the resources and the truth about their heritage, their history, and just all those things, right, then, oh shoot, like there's a fear. And so in order to contain, it's like hush hush. Let's only teach them that they should be grateful, right? Let's only teach them part of their history. Let's only teach them this back end that we're more comfortable with them understanding, right? And that's just not with, within the school system, right? That's just in human beings in general, right? Because there is a fear of people seeing the truth, and then the truth not being accepted, or me being judged. And so even with, parents only teaching a certain, or sharing a certain, bit of their story, or only what they want us to know, because of fear that we'll judge them for their past indiscretions or whatever they did, right? So so when we think about, they're just human beings that's in the classroom teaching. And so everyone has their own triggers, their own issues that they're dealing with. And so if they're not dealing with their own stuff, and they project that on us, or project that on, the roles, right? At the end of the day, it's power. Privilege is power, influence, right? And so when you're in a position of power, you get to, disseminates your influence, right? What you want people to see and know, and what's comfortable for you on everybody else. And so I think Jason brought up a great point. Representation is important. That's why it's important to get Black people on certain boards, to get us in the education system, on, school boards, in the boardrooms of businesses, at executive levels, because we now get to see what our people need within this context of the conversation, right? And so that's, and I know I went around a tangent, but just to talk about, just the whole piece of, when did you understand and see this? It wasn't until I got out and got into business and started learning about professional development, and having to go through professional development, and seeing, the things and why people's businesses fail. And, it's a lot of the times the CEO's decision. Well, why did they make that decision? And you break it down, and it always comes up to some type of greed or whatever. But if you trace that back down to other, emotions, and kind of like the emotion wheel that Jason talked about, there's always an underlying layer. And so for me, every time I read these case studies and started to see things, and why athletes, get $1 million, and millions and millions, and they waste all this money, supporting family and all this other stuff, and now they're bankrupt. It's kind of like, there's something deeper here. And why aren't we talking about this? Why aren't we prepared? And that's when really I started to, understand that, and really kind of start having conversations, self-education, self-taught, and then really started to find resources and find people. And, slowly but surely those conversations started to happen. But, it's knowledge is power, literally. I mean, I know it sounds cliche, and people say it in hashtags or in slogans, but it truly is powerful when we are able to get the knowledge that we're missing, and be able to understand it, right? And be able for it to be broken down in a form where we can consume it and absorb it, and be able to trace it and see how it impacts us in our own lives. But then we can share our stories and help other people. So it's unfortunate that, we don't get a lot of this conversation. I think these are the things we should be learning in school, right? These are the fundamentals of life that we should be learning in school, but when you have hurt people, teaching people, it never comes, because then that means they have to face their own in order to do it.
You know what's interesting about what you were saying, that we need to have these conversations in schools and we need to teach them in the schools? You know what would be cool is if someone were to create like a Schoolhouse Rock that was all about mental
Um,
health, and let kids watch that. And
we when I was actually when we were in high school, we created a group which we would meet in one of my English teachers' classroom, kind of during lunchtime, about every day, or every other day. And it was basically, centered around mental health, being able to express yourself and what you were going through, whether it be through art, through writing, just through sitting down, through talking. And, I think it's even kind of touching on the fact that, just the curriculum itself, and the way that, as a minority or as a Black person, you don't understand your history, you don't understand yourself. And so because you don't have that history, you don't have that knowledge of self, or other than, slavery or things that you have been through or your ancestors has been through, that kind of puts such a strain on yourself, in the sense of, you don't have that empowerment. You don't have, anyone that you can look up to other than, famous people that you see in relatively your environment or on television. And so, when we had created that, we created that as an outlet for people to be able to express themselves, for us to all understand each other. That got shut down. Because I think the principal heard about it or whatever, and was just like, hey, we don't want that. And it's like, we're not hurting anybody, we're not doing anything. There's safe spaces in school. Why isn't there any necessary need, or there's having a way to express yourself and as an outlet through poetry or whatever in the classroom is not allowed. And so I always wondered about that. And for me, when that happened in high school, because I didn't have that, growing up in education, I had to, and I think it's a pattern, just hearing it from all of us, I had to go learn myself, teach myself what is mental health, what, who I am as a Black person, as an individual. And so, I think it should be more in the education system. I think it should be more, readily available in the education system, or at least, have a platform for that to be in the education system. But it's so, it's so condensed into a curriculum of, this is what we have to teach, or this is what needs to be taught. This is what needs to be going on in the school. And it's so regulated, by people who don't know anything about us and don't know us at all, or don't know our struggle, don't know our history, anything like that, who are making decisions about what we learn and how we operate in a day-to-day basis.
Of course. And again, it's one of those things, like you said, it feels like they're not going to do that because it would empower too much. They're not going to do that because it wouldn't, and it's not just empowering Black people, but it would empower everyone a little bit more. It really would. And that's how you keep people separated. That's how you hold people down, is when you keep that power. Because yes, racism is big, but also when you start thinking about classism, and we get into that conversation, again, that's another video down the line. When you get into that like mindset and you really learn about, okay, classism, racism, all this other stuff, there's more hands in the pot than what we think on how a lot of stuff happens in this country and how everything else is going. But now I want to transition to our last topic, and this is the advice.